Hi everyone, and welcome back to the next video in the large language model course that is part of the masterclass on building AI products. This video, and likely the subsequent one, is going to focus on the project part of this course, where we are actually going to help you build an AI product which is called Narrative Tales. Narrative Tales is a personalized podcast generator that creates a podcast for you based on the topic that you select and in the style that you would like. So it's a product that I have deployed locally and I keep using whenever I want to learn something new and don't have the time to read something. But hopefully you will also find it interesting and in the process learn about how to work with LLMs and how to kind of approach this entire task. But there is a certain inspiration behind it, right? So I don't know if you have ever heard about the DJ Spotify introduced. So it basically is an AI DJ that comes in between songs as they are playing and kind of gives you a bit more insight into the artist, into the story behind that song. So kind of like a radio show, right? And that definitely lends a certain narrative to it, makes the experience a lot more enjoyable. And similarly, there are other products like Radio GPT. This is a service that is provided to all radio stations in the United States, where they actually pull information from weather websites, from social media websites, from local newspapers, and kind of put it together in a narrative form, which is then offered as a service to local radio channels who can then use this as part of their radio streams. And similarly, there is another product called Radio Ad Maker, where you can actually specify your product and it then generates the radio jingle in the local dialect or specific with local references of where you want to air this particular ad, right? So there are several radio channels all around the world, and you can then put in your product and generate a jingle for it in the local dialect with local references so that you're connecting with the right audience. So the whole trend here is towards personalized audio generation, and that's exactly what Narrative Tales is about, and these were the inspirations for it. Now, when I say generate your own podcast, this is the task that we want to do, right? So you can start with any PDF, that's what we do, but you can also extend this to any kind of text input. But the way I always approach an AI product is to imagine how I, as a human being, would do something like this. So just as an example, let's say that you recently read a news article, or there is a report or a research paper that has been published, which is, let's say, quite long. Like typically these PDFs are of the order of 50 to 80 pages. It could also be a company's annual report, for instance, right? So there are a lot of examples of very large PDFs which you necessarily don't have the time to go through, but you can actually listen to it in the form of a podcast on your run or while you're commuting to work and so on. So how would I, as a human being, approach this problem? The way I would think about it is I actually would read the entire report, and then as I'm reading, I would maybe highlight some text, I would identify some key points here, maybe make some notes in the margins of the PDF. And so these are the ways in which I'm kind of sifting out the important parts of this PDF, which I would then use in the next step when I'm writing the script for the podcast, right? So the first step was going through the entire PDF and summarizing it, highlighting important points, making some notes, and then making use of these notes. I then go into the second step where I say, okay, what does my narrative look like? What is the story for my podcast? How will I write the script of this podcast? And while doing this, so while writing the script of the podcast, I will refer back to the notes that I had or the summaries that I made and stuff like that. And once I have written the script, then I would put myself in front of a mic or a video if it's a video podcast, and then go through the script or read through the script, right? So that would be the way that a human being, at least in my case, that's how I would approach it. Now, what we are going to do now is assume that same approach, but instead of getting a human being to do it, or instead of doing it ourselves, we will use an LLM to do it. And I sort of always mirror this process because this is exactly the way you would approach it also with an LLM. You would first have the text corpus, which is nothing but the PDF in this case. Then you would need to summarize and identify the key talking points. This is exactly what you would use an LLM to do with a prompt. Once you have done that, then the second part is you use these summaries and highlights that you have to again use an LLM to generate the podcast script for you. Again, not using a human being, not doing it yourself, but using an LLM to do it. And once you've got the script, now it's about reading the script, which again, you can use not an LLM, but a text-to-speech model also provided by OpenAI in order to then generate the podcast from it, right? So we've basically drawn an AI equivalent for each of the human steps that are involved in generating a podcast. And this is often how I would encourage you to think about creating AI products. So take a process that would typically be done by a human being and then apply it to see how an LLM would function in this perspective. A lot of you may ask, why don't we combine everything and send the entire PDF to the LLM and get it to do it in one step? I'm sure you can do this, and I think in many cases it might also work. But as we're just starting to build AI products, the way I would recommend you to approach this is to kind of break it down into steps and use separate calls to the LLM for each step. And just to kind of get a sense of how do you shape the prompt in this, how do you kind of look at the LLM response, is it exactly what you want and stuff like that. So just to kind of slowly ramp up, and as you build your expertise and as you build your capability, then of course you will get a lot of ideas to kind of mash this together, do it in one step, do it in a better way and style. But as we're starting now, I would recommend to kind of make individual LLM calls for individual steps in the entire process. And that's what we're going to do today in the project. The project is already available to you. So there is a project notebook. So what we are going to do is make use of what we call as a Jupyter notebook. And I will walk through this Jupyter notebook in this video and the subsequent video and show you how to go through the whole thing. The idea here is to already provide you with a standard template and a way to approach the project, but also have exercises in there where you would be expected to fill it in, and at the end you should have a generated MP3 file, so your podcast, and this is what I encourage you to submit to me, and I can then, along with the notebook, so along with the prompts and so on that you've used, and I can then provide you with feedback on what's the best approach, what is something that you could change and stuff like this, right? So the whole idea is go through the project step by step. This is what I'm going to show you now. In the end, then attempt the project yourself and submit the MP3 file or the podcast that you've generated on any topic. It's really up to you, but I would then judge the steps that you have taken, the prompt that you've used, and the quality of the output and how it can be improved. So that's the goal of this project. So let's quickly switch to that.